Drier and breezy for your Thursday. Then as we head into Thursday night, temperatures will dip once again into the mid-60s. Friday's highs just a tad warmer in the low 80s, but it will be windy for your Friday. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Jennifer Correa for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning and welcome back. Another beautiful Wednesday here on the Treasure Coast. And we're coming to you live, of course, from our studio that's just off the St. Lucie River here in Stuart. If you remember the heated show a couple of weeks ago with talk about Martin's Eric Miller, Political Operative Robert Burns called in and the fireworks flew. Robert agreed to come into the studio to set the record straight and joins us today. He refutes many of the allegations, and I believe it's important to hear all sides of the story. Robert Burns is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Space Coast Racket. He is retired from the United States Army with an honorable discharge and moved back to his hometown after retiring. He is the president of the Relentless Group and owner of the Social Wizards. He is also founder of Tourniquets for Teachers, a nonprofit dedicated to training teachers and staff to save lives in the event of a shooting in our schools, which unfortunately we've just experienced again this week. He is a married father of 3 and enjoys telling awful dad jokes. Welcome to the show, Robert. I appreciate you coming down.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about a bunch of different topics here today, but you were a nurse in the military, right?
Yes, I was a critical care nurse. I started off as a combat medic and then went on to nursing school.
What made you decide to become a political consultant, campaign manager, political editor?
I never thought that would have been something that, my career path would take me in. When I retired in 2017, right before then, I had an opportunity to go to Harvard Business School for free. Wow. So I took as many classes and courses as I could and got some certifications in marketing and strategic leadership, strategic planning. When I came home, I started a marketing business that was pretty successful. Then my cousin, Kenny Johnson, who's a city councilman in Palm Bay, decided he wanted to run for office, and he asked for my help. And so I helped him, and he won so overwhelmingly that it kind of put me on the map because he became the youngest person ever elected in Brevard County. He unseated a very powerful and well-connected and funded incumbent Republican. And so we ran all of our campaign on social media, which hadn't been done yet. So then people wanted to find out who I was and how I could help them. But I had been gone from Brevard County for almost 20 years because I was in the military. So before I could help him, I had to see what had been happening for the last 20 years in Brevard County, and there was a lot. So after learning that, after his race, I decided I needed to kind of address some of the things that I found out in doing the research to help his campaign.
And one thing led to another. What year was that you started to help him with his campaign?
That was 2017-18.
Okay,
yeah.
So here we are in 23, 5-6 years later.
Right.
So folks, if you thought DeSantis versus Disneyland was a heated topic, then the dispute between Representative Randy Fine and Robert Burns is an inferno. It has seemingly become personal. Representative Randy Fine is currently in his 4th term in the House of Representatives representing Brevard County and has filed to run for termed-out Senator Mayfield's seat in 2024. Representative Fine is one of the names also being bandied around for possibly the next governor of Florida, and Representative Fine has recently stated he has been approached to be the next president of FAU, Go Owls, by the DeSantis administration. Randy Fine has accused Robert of rape, sodomy, child abuse, theft of government property, perjury, wife beating, lying about being honorably discharged from the Army, being convicted of embezzling over $22,000 from the Army, and being a multi-state felon. In addition, he claimed Brevard Executive Committeeman Robert Burns has been charged with 116 counts of election fraud. Robert is not a committeeman, however. Most counts have been settled or dismissed, but there are still outstanding complaints. But before we get into all that, Robert has agreed to be open and transparent about his involvement in the 2020 Indiantown election. We're all connected here, Brevard, Indiantown, and there's even a Palm City connection. So, Robert, folks in Indiantown realize you were simply hired to do a job. But this young village, incorporated just 5 years ago, has residents wanting to know what happened in that election and who was involved. They do appreciate your openness and willingness to shed some light on the village's second election. It was incorporated in 2018. Little background for that: in the 2020 race, Guy Parker was running against incumbent and then Mayor Guyton Stone. Indiantown landowner Brian West of Palm City hired you to become Guyton's campaign manager. Through some tactics we'll cover today, Burns' candidate, Guyton Stone, won the election over Guy Parker, a 15-year resident of Indiantown, and he lost by just 27 votes. So developer Brian West, he's from Palm City. He owns 64 acres in Indiantown that he wanted rezoned for a much higher density than is allowed. That parcel is currently zoned for 32 acres, but he would like to have about 512 units on that property. Brian West is currently in trial for second-degree felony, bribery, and third-degree felonies, conspiracy to commit bribery, and unlawful use of two-way communications device in Palm Bay and Brevard County, where your cousin, Kenny Johnson, is also a councilman. West has claimed he is innocent of these charges. So, Robert, tell us what brought you to Indiantown.
That was a very busy time for me at the time. You spoke a little bit about Randy Fine. I was running a race for Marcy Atkins, who was running against Randy Fine. In the middle of that race, I got a call from Brian West asking for my help for the town of Indiantown, which I had never heard of before. And what's funny is when I started putting together Facebook ads for Indiantown, the Facebook removed the ads because they thought that Indiantown was some kind of epithet or derogatory term and not the actual name of the city.
Right.
So my ads kept getting declined, so I had to keep going back and forth with Facebook just to get the ads to run. But so they called me to consult for Indiantown. I drove down here and saw just how small of a town it is. It's not the typical kind of race that I usually get involved with. I'm normally involved with all the way up to congressional, U.S. Congress campaigns. So this was a very small race for me, which was the only reason I decided I could take it on while being so busy with, running against Randy Fine of all people.
As you drove into Indiantown, what were your impressions of the village?
I almost missed it. I drove in, I crossed some railroad tracks. I went to go meet Guyton. It was a two-story building where his office was. I think there was some cabinets or something in there. And then after I spoke with him, I drove around for a little bit, and there wasn't a lot to see, compared to, Brevard County.
Right.
But it seemed like a very small, unique community, new. There wasn't a lot, to take in, but it looked like there was a good community of people.
Excellent. So some of the information is already known through your depositions, but who brought you to Indiantown?
That would be Brian West.
And what was the purpose of your work?
They wanted me to consult to see what would be needed to win the race. Like I said, for such a small race, to me it was a bit overkill, in my opinion, for me to come down here. For a race that small, I feel like a candidate should be able to do that work themselves. And if you can't knock on, less than 1,000 doors, the votes it was less than 1,000 votes, I believe, then you probably shouldn't be elected. So it was easy work for me to kind of look at the history, because there wasn't a lot of it, and to look at the demographics of the voting population in Indiantown. So just looking at those things, and then looking at some campaign finances for his opponent, that to me was the only strategy that needed to be brought out, because I didn't really see any campaigning going on either side at that time.
How did Brian West know you?
I think he was referred to me by another person in Palm Bay, I believe. I think that's what happened.
Okay. And how were you paid?
They paid me through, you have online credit card processing things. There was one called raise the money. They use that. It's kind of like PayPal, but for
Okay.
political campaigns.
That's an organization that's through Brian West?
No, it's just like it's a organization kind of like it's like PayPal or any other credit card processing.
Okay, I meant who supplied the money to that?
Oh,
to
I'm
pay
sorry,
you?
Brian West.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. You had stated previously that Brian West initially called you. What exactly did he say or request me at the time? You kind of covered this, but what was his directives?
He talked about my campaign with Councilman Johnson, my cousin. He said he was impressed with the results of how we ran that campaign and wanted to do the same thing down here in Indiantown. And he told me that the guy that he wanted to win was Guyton Stone. And so I kept getting confused because Guyton Stone and Guy Parker, so I frequently
Right.
intermix their names sometimes. But
Right.
yeah, but that was
easy
that
to
was
do.
Yeah.
Did West say he was working with anyone in Indiantown in particular?
No, he didn't.
And did he mention any other names to you besides Guyton Stone?
No, he told me, he tried to give me some background on some of the concerns he had about the opponent and his affiliations with some people here. I don't know any of these people that were down
Right,
here.
right,
So
right.
the first time I'm hearing the information is from him. So I had to do some research myself, just Googling names and looking at news articles from the past to try to figure out what he was talking about and what was the reason for that.
And did he say why he wanted Guyton to win over his opponents?
He did not, and I'm still not sure what the interest was, not just for him, but there was a lot of real estate organizations and individuals that were interested in this race, which was kind of what stood out to me, looking at who was supporting Guy and who was supporting Guyton.
Right.
They were both being supported by different real estate or property developers. And I don't know what the impetus of that was, but there's definitely something there. I don't know if there's gold or oil under the.
You're not from the area, so
Yeah,
right. So it's a little difficult. What information did West give you to get started?
He didn't give me much. He wanted me to kind of, as an outsider looking in, to kind of assess, any problem,
Okay.
that in problem solving, see what I could see,
Okay.
from the outside, and what we
Take
could
your-
take advantage of, what needed to be addressed. He didn't really give me too much.
Did he give you any phone numbers or email addresses? How
No.
did you reach Guyton?
Well, I can't remember if he gave me Guyton's number or I'm sure that's what it was. If it was either a phone number or an email, then I set up the time to come down here to meet with him. I think I came here twice. I came here once to meet with him, and then I came here to assess the area myself. But I only had one in-person meeting with Guyton.
Okay, all right. Did you meet with Guyton before you assessed the area, or did you assess the area and then meet with Guyton?
I met with him first.
Okay, met with him first. So you came back to our wonderful
Yes, I
village
did.
of Indiantown.
Yeah.
So glad that you did. It is a wonderful place. So how did you know? I'm going to skip that question for right now, but what was the content of your initial conversation with people in Indiantown?
Just talking about what the needs were, so the reason I think that I've been somewhat successful in politics is because it's marketing, so I'm a marketer. And so instead of marketing a product, you're marketing a person.
Right.
Right. And whenever you're marketing something, markets are successful when they fulfill a need. So I'm trying to assess what is the need in Indiantown. What is it that people wanted? It turns out they want a Publix.
Right. Right.
that was
You're
very
right.
that was very very popular amongst people. They wanted a grocery store. So very very simple things. We weren't talking about solving global warming or these big complex issues. These people just want basic needs met. And so that was kind of what I gathered just from talking to the people, and then developing a plan on how to show them that Guyton Stone would be the best person to help provide those things for them.
Okay. In your deposition, you stated you drove down there a couple times, which you just stated, and met with candidates there and met with some of the people there. Besides Guyton Stone, who else did you meet with?
I didn't meet with anyone other than he was the only elected official or candidate that I met with. Everyone else would have been just residents just walking around the town and knocking on doors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never met any other sitting council member or somebody running for council Did you meet the village manager?
No.
You did not meet the village, which was Howard Brown. So, just picking your words apart, you had used a plural candidates in the deposition. So you're clarifying now that it was one candidate.
Yeah, it's just one candidate.
Does the name Anthony Dowling ring a bell to you?
No.
Okay. And Howard Brown was the village manager. Again, you said you didn't meet him, so nothing. No, there were no conversations with either of those.
No.
Okay. You already told us kind of what the gist of the conversations was of the people you met in Indiantown. I think it was wonderful. You walked around, and you're absolutely right. Publix is something that's on the top of people's mind. You know, folks, Indiantown was just incorporated in 2018, so it's really a big deal to them. They were kind of this village that the county controlled. They didn't have control of their own destiny, so that's where it was incorporated, and it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. So
Right.
this election that you were involved in, the reason why everybody is so anxious and curious about what happened behind the scenes, because this was only their second election, and
Right.
they felt like some dirty politics came in. And then, let's face it, Robert, you came in from Brevard County, and they're like, wait a minute, what's this guy doing? He doesn't even know the area. So that's, again, I want to say thank you for coming down to answer these questions. They're important. This is various questions from various residents.
And I completely understand some of the concerns and anxiety, with that,
Right.
especially in a new town where you're not used to having elections yet. And it's not unusual that when, elections are going on, that consultants come from other areas, because there's not a lot of us. Well, there's not a lot of us who have success. So when you're successful one area, word kind of spreads, and then they come. Like I've run congressional campaigns all the way down to West Palm Beach and Broward County, all the way up to New Smyrna Beach, and it's not because there aren't people down there. People just recruit you by word of mouth. So.
This was such a small election, and one that you wouldn't typically get involved in.
Right.
This is a hindsight question, 2020. Do you regret at all getting involved with this small election?
I don't regret it. I could have done without it, but it was not a lot of work for me, to do. It was almost like a part-time, thing.
Right.
At the end of the day, it was probably, maybe a week and a half of work.
Okay. Okay.
So.
Right. And you said where you had met with Guyton. Do you remember about what time of day it was?
Probably, it was in the afternoon sometime. I'm not sure. It took a while to get down.
What was his expectations of you?
I'm not sure. He was excited to meet me. He had heard about me, but I'm not sure what his expectations was. I guess he expected to win, but.
Did he know how you were being paid, or who brought you on?
That I'm not sure about. I know he knows that I was connected to him through Brian West, but I don't know the extent
Of
that.
the who agreed to pay for what? You just
Right.
know Brian West paid you.
Right.
Okay. Can you tell me, was there anything else that we haven't covered that was discussed with Guyton at that initial meeting?
No, he just kind of gave me the background of like some of the interpersonal relationships between him and the guy.
Okay.
And some of the disputes that have been going on, back and forth, stuff that I normally
Important for a
wouldn't-
campaign.
Right. And it's things that I wouldn't necessarily be in the newspaper, in such a small race. So just kind of informing me of like, this is what's been going on. This is why you're here. This is why I need your help.
Okay.
That type of thing.
You only met with him once. How about, did you have further phone conversations with him throughout the campaign?
I did, yes.
Okay. Do you know about how many times that would have happened?
Phone conversations, maybe 3 or 4. We probably text messaged, back and forth, because I started to, part of what I do is run the social media.
Okay.
So a lot of times if you see, when a candidate's running, they start a social media page for their
Right,
campaign.
of course.
And you can look and see how many people administer those pages. Like if you look at my Space Coast Rocket page, you'll see there's like 18 administrators
Right.
on that page. So everything you see isn't necessarily coming from Robert Burns. It could be coming from anyone that has access to the page. And it's the same thing with him. So if I was about to post something, whether it's a survey, I think at that time you could still do polls on Facebook. So I use that a lot to do free polling.
Right.
Because polling's very expensive. Excuse me. And so I would use polls to say, hey, I'm about to post a poll. This is the reason I'm posting it, and this is what I plan to do with the information. So that was kind of the context of the conversations that I would have back and forth with him. He just trusted me to do, what I was being paid to do.
Right,
and I just kept him informed on it.
With his particular campaign page, were you the only manager? You just mentioned a lot of pages have a lot of managers. You were hired to run his campaign, so were you the only one on that
It's me
page?
and him. That was it. Yeah.
You and Guyton. Okay. Yeah. Are any of the texts between you and Guyton available? If somebody were to ask for them,
I don't know. I could check. I'm not sure.
Not sure if you still have them or not.
I don't see why they wouldn't be.
Okay. And did you also communicate through Facebook itself?
No.
No. You had said this. Guyton was aware of who hired you to represent him?
Yes.
He was aware. And you also ran several ads that made Guy Parker appear racist. This was his opponent. By displaying Guy next to a Confederate flag stating Heritage Matters and Crooked stating Crooked Guy Parker's for sale. Did Guyton supply you information to use to create those Facebook ads? How did you come up with that content?
So with that ad specifically, that's one of the ones that's still kind of pending with the FEC. So I can't get into the specific details of the ad. Once the FEC is done with that, I think next month, then I can talk a little bit more specifically about it. But it's one of the accusations, I believe, is that the ad is deceptive, and a case can be made that all political ads are
Right.
deceptive, right? Donald Trump can make an ad about Hillary Clinton saying that she, punches puppies,
Right.
And the thing about a political ad is that we have a legal requirement to put a disclaimer, and every ad I ran had a disclaimer. So no matter what you thought about the content of the ad, there's no question of who it came from, and it came from me. So there, and I guess that's about all I can say is that my ads have a disclaimer. The purpose of the disclaimer is so that the public knows where this ad came from, and they came from me.
Okay. I don't think this would interfere with the other FEC investigation, but it clearly had strong racial overtones. Whose idea was that?
I guess the best I can say is that the information that I saw and that was provided to me is what led to the creation of the ad.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Guy Parker, I reached out to him. I said, I'd like your response to this. And he gave me a quote back. And this is directly from Guy Parker. Any person who knows me knows I am a Luddite and not capable of scrubbing anything. Tell him I have my share of issues, but racism is not one of them, unlike himself. That's from Guy Parker.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's fair. And I think I've tried to even speak to Mr. Parker. But, to be honest, I've never met someone who's been accused of racism that said, yeah, I am.
Right.
It's been very, very few and far between where you have someone that just openly says that.
And I'll ask you here on the radio, we talked about it with your communications with Guyton. Will you share those with me after the show? Will you look to see if you have any? Will you share those with me?
I'll see. I believe I still have them, but, it's I don't know how
I'd
many
appreciate
years
it if
ago.
you'd look and
Yeah.
share what you have if you
Sure.
would. After Guyton's re-election, did you have any further contact with him?
No. I
Okay.
think when he won, I think I sent him a text message saying congratulations,
Right.
and that was the end of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And did Guyton contact you after Brian West was arrested?
No.
No. Did anyone from Indiantown contact you any time after Guyton Stone's re-election?
I mean, other than hate mail, hate messages and things like that from people I don't know, but no.
Right.
Yeah.
That's part of having those negative
Yeah.
campaigns, isn't
Yeah.
it? So,
Yeah.
has Brian West or anyone acquainted with West contacted you after his arrest?
No.
And to your knowledge, has West had any private contact with Guyton Stone or any Village of Indiantown council member or the village manager?
No.
You posted on Facebook a screenshot of voters requesting absentee ballots with the intent to show Barbara Cloudis was not a resident of Indiantown. Pursuant to Florida Statute 101.62, Part 3, the absentee roll is to remain confidential and is only for the use of a stated few. Furthermore, according to the Martin County Supervisor of Elections Protocol and Practice, an absentee list is only able to be obtained by completing a signed statement of understanding as the use of the rolls. According to Talk About Martin's Eric Miller, there were just 3 candidates in Indiantown primary that made the request for this list from the supervisor election. That was Guy Parker, Janet Hernandez, and Anthony Zweiner. Who gave you access to those absentee rolls, that screenshot?
They were sent to me from I guess it would have been supervisor. I'm not sure, whoever the record custodian is the person that sent me those.
Of Martin County?
Yes, because I'm not sure what.
It's Vicki Davis.
Vicki, okay.
Yeah.
Because as a campaign manager, we have access to more public records than the typical public does. So if I would make a request to the supervisor of elections in Brevard County, I can get the entire voter rolls,
Okay.
with a lot more information that normally, people don't get. And it's only for campaign managers, people who have a need, for that information.
Right.
That aren't just going to sell it to, some phone spamming company to,
Right, to spam people.
Right. So that's how I got that information. It was emailed directly to me.
Can you send me that email? It just proves that these were sent to you. You didn't get them from anybody else.
I can try.
I know we're going back, and I know
Yeah.
this is one of many campaigns, but that
Right.
would just be helpful. It's one of those things to clear up.
There's no problem with that.
That's
But
what
that's
the show is for. Is
it's
to
a very
clarify.
standard. It's a very standard request. Any campaign manager or consultant is going to ask for that information because you need to know who the people are that you're targeting to campaign to, and that's the only way to get that information is from the supervisor's office.
Okay. Okay. So another question is, there was, fake characters on Facebook. Who was playing Tommy Kenny on Facebook?
No idea.
You don't know who that
No.
profile belonged to? Is there anything else pertaining to Indiantown that you can tell us or would like to tell us that's hanging out there?
I've seen, there was a lot of complaints filed. There was a lot of people, I don't know, there was some people upset about the results of the campaign. There's people upset about the results of every campaign. I just left a school board meeting last night that lasted 5 hours. There were people upset about what happened at the school board meeting. People are always going to be upset just because there's the left side, there's a right side, and there's NPAs. And I'm used to that, and I'm used to taking the criticism of that. I know there's a lot of things that drive some of the people being upset is misinformation or misunderstanding, like the voter rolls. Of some people like, how dare you have my date of birth, and well, it's public record. You have my address, yes, it's public record. Unless you have an exemption. I myself have an exemption because of my military history and things like that. So, but a lot of people don't understand that. So when you have that information, they think that you've done something illegal or nefarious, but it's not. It's just they're uninformed about what is public record and what is not. So, and I'm willing to answer any questions that any resident there has. I will take my time and field any phone call. The funny thing is, no one's called me.
Okay.
This is the first time that I've had an opportunity to answer these questions because no one's asked me directly.
You. Okay. And with the absentee voter rolls, there's obviously some sort of communication there where somebody did try to find out who all requested them and what the information that came back to them. Your name was not on that list. So, somewhere, that's why I asked if you can
Right.
just show us the email that you requested. It came from our supervisor election. That should be public record anyway.
I'm about 90% sure that's the answer to that question. But even if it's not, whether it was sent to me from someone else who had it, I'm still allowed to have it. Just as my role, in the campaign. But
Okay.
I'm pretty confident that's where I got it because that's just something that I do at the start of every campaign.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that talk about Miller's or talk about Martin Eric Miller. We'll look to see
Yeah.
if you did get those. So, Palm Bay. What's the big picture in your opinion going on there with the Brian West arrest?
Oh, with the Brian West?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. That I was kind of caught off guard. When I said I could have did without it, I don't regret working with Indiantown, but I could have done without it. And obviously, I had no idea that these things that were going on with Councilman Anderson and, the wearing of the wire and stuff because I wasn't involved in those races. At the time, I was running the Randy Fine race.
Okay.
So when I saw those things, and I know the people that were in there and the candidates that were running for mayor at the time, it kind of blew my mind, but I wasn't surprised. When I started the Space Coast rocket, it started from the excuse me, the David Isnardi. You might not be familiar with it, but the city manager, some of the deputy city manager, who was David Isnardi, and 3 of the councilmen, they were basically all wearing wires on each other by the FBI, and the FDLE was kind of putting them against each other for bribery. There was like prostitution, there was drugs, there was all kinds of things going on. And when I got that investigation, that was one of the first things that I published on the Space Coast rocket. And Brian Anderson was one of the councilmen that was mainly wearing the wire, trying to get the city manager to bribe him for a car allowance in order to vote a certain way. So when I saw the same thing basically happen with Brian West, Brian Anderson again is wearing a wire with this time not a city manager, but with a developer to try to buy a vote, for this little piece of property. I drive by it every single day now, to rezone it so he could build a gas station there.
Okay.
And that's what it was. That was what it was all about. And to me, it's ridiculous, to think that someone would put their livelihood on the line for $1,000.
Right. Right.
To commit a felony that they're. What are you gaining from it?
Right.
And for him to put himself on the line, I can't imagine what that property is worth compared to everything else that he owns, that he would, try to bribe councilmen who are known for wearing wires and cooperating with the FBI. The whole thing is just ridiculous to me that both parties, got involved to that fact.
Well, it is in court right now, so we'll see how that goes through. And speaking of Palm Bay, I want you to just talk briefly. I'm not looking for secondhand information, but it is your cousin, Kenny Johnson.
Right.
He has been called a pedophile repeatedly on social media, of course. So tell us a little bit about what you know about that situation.
It's been really unfortunate. I wrote a lengthy article, I think 2 years ago, about why is Randy Fine going after Kenny Johnson? Because it just seems like why? Kenny Johnson hasn't done anything to Randy Fine, other than exist. And it goes back to some text messages between Randy Fine and Kenny Johnson about me. And and I published them in the article. And it says basically he says he's going to hold Kenny accountable for his cousin, which is me. So everything that he does to Kenny, the motivation, Randy says, is Robert Burns. Kenny has, to be clear, despite what many people say, including Randy Fine, Kenny Johnson has no criminal record whatsoever. None. They put a mugshot that was published when he was arrested. It was published by Space Coast Daily. They published mugshots every single day of who was arrested. They went and dug that up. They published it. They put it out during his campaign. We addressed it. He was arrested. The charges were dismissed and dropped.
What was the age of the girl? Because pedophile, it does indicate it was a minor.
Right. So the girl was 17 years old.
How old was he?
He was 22. He had just got back from college. He was a college football player. Just got back, moved back to Brevard County, back to Palm Bay, where he grew up. The sad thing is, or not the sad thing, but the confusing thing is, it's legal for them to have a relationship under Florida law. I think it's called the Romeo-Juliet law. A 22-year-old and a 17-year-old can have a relationship. They can have a physical relationship. They cannot send text messages back and forth that may be inappropriate.
Okay.
That's illegal.
Okay.
And that's what the arrest stemmed from. And I'm not even saying that my cousin sent a message to her. There was probably messages sent back and forth. Now, when her mother became aware of that, that's when the police were called. But she didn't know that it was Councilman Johnson. She thought that it was a teacher at her school. Councilman Johnson thought that she was a student at FIT because she worked at a store at FIT.
Did he work at the school, though, at the time? Her
at
school?
FIT?
No, her school that she was going to. Did he work there?
He was an assistant football coach there.
Okay.
So that's as far as employment goes. I'm not sure how coaches, employment is with the school board, but he was an assistant football coach there.
Okay.
But he met her at FIT.
Okay.
And then the charges were dropped, and then the record was expunged. And this was before he ran for anything. You know, this was quite a while ago. But that got dug up, and it's been, I mean, he's sent out, Randy Fine himself has sent out mailers to every resident in Palm Bay about it. He's had yard signs paid for with his mugshot plastered all over the city. He's had robotext messages sent out. He's had voicemails sent out that scared the entire city, saying, pedophile alert. There's a Deputy Mayor Kenny Johnson was arrested, making it sound like it just happened right now. And, you know, hide your children, you know, and it caused people to call the school board. It caused people to call the city hall in a panic because of Randy Fine continuing to do this. And why?
So, folks, I see all your many comments. I appreciate that you're tuning in. I'll let you know right now, there's a lot of information to cover in this show, and Robert has agreed. We're not going to get through it in this hour, but Robert has agreed as soon as this hour ends, we're going to shut down the Facebook Live. We got to move a location, and then we're going to start Facebook Live back up. It'll probably be at about 10 or 15 minute lag, and we're going to get through all of our questions, and I'm going to go through your comments as well. So I'm going to do that in the next part of the Facebook Live. It won't make it on the radio because we're running short on time, and there's a lot more to discuss here. And I saw somebody said, why am I giving Robert a platform? If you follow my show, you know I don't sensationalize. I don't exaggerate. I think it's important to hear all sides of the story, and that's what we're doing here today. The next part of the show, this is about the Randy Fine allegations. So we're going to move on. I appreciate you with the Indiantown questions. It was very informative, and it just helps people understand what happened in that election. Your responses, Robert, to many of the allegations are in a Facebook post, and I'm putting that in the link in the comments below. It's a very long post, but it covers your view on a lot of those allegations. So you can go there, folks, if you want. Burns and Fine have a long-standing feud that is very public. Representative Fine does not hold back. Robert is here to share his side of the story. I reviewed this extensively, and from the information available, there are some truths, but there's also exaggeration and sensationalism going on. If you've listened to my show, as I just said, you know I don't do gotcha interviews. I don't sensationalize to get attention. My personal belief is just stick with the truth. There's no need to exaggerate or stretch the truth. This is a case where I may not agree with Burns' political campaign tactics, but he's a political operative. His tactics are unfortunately, it's commonplace in today's politics, and he's certainly not the only one that creates negative campaigns. Fine has complained Robert is dangerous, a serial rapist, child abuser, convicted wife beater, sociopath, convicted sex offender, and a convicted violent felon. Has Representative Fine taken his vendetta too far, or is he simply stating what others won't? We're going to break these claims down, and we're going to hear from Robert so that, folks, you can decide. I just hope you listen to both sides. Robert, how did this all start?
This started, in my opinion, this started when I didn't know who Randy Fine was, but I happened to be at a county commission meeting that he was presenting one of his bills to. And after listening to him present it, some of the things he said didn't make any sense to me. So I got up during public comment and asked questions. He was asked by the county commission if he would like to respond to that question, and he said no. And I was kind of taken aback by that. So then I went and found him on social media. I found his Facebook page and asked the same questions, and he deleted my posts and blocked me. And so then I was started looking into who is Randy Fine and why is this guy being so abrasive and and defensive about a very valid and basic question about his own bill. After that, I was hired by a group of conservatives in Brevard County that were afraid of Randy Fine, and you can see why. Because of how he kind of retaliates. To develop a Facebook page where they could talk about the problems that they were having with Randy Fine and about the things that they thought that he was doing were wrong. There were a lot of accusations about him about he didn't live in his district that he was representing, which he's required to do, about Second Amendment issues, about him voting for the Parkland bill, increasing the age.
Now, the living in the district thing, I think they talked about that. There was hurricane damage on one residence, so he had another residence. They reviewed that and decided that he could legally serve in that district.
Right, and that was for the remainder of that specific term, not the following terms.
Okay.
So what he did after that was he rented a condo in the district that he didn't live at. So when you're registered to vote, it has to be where you live. And we've seen people at the villages get in trouble for this. We've seen the one of the officers from the George Floyd case, wherever the George Floyd incident happened, he was voting in Orlando. But you can't do that because you don't live in Orlando. So you can have a residence all over the place, but you have to vote where you live at.
Primary residence.
Right, and it wasn't. He wanted everyone to believe he lived in a 1,000-square-foot condo and not his $5 million mansion on the beach, which was outside of his district.
Why do you think you've drawn, you in particular? If you go to Randy Fine's Facebook page, you are all over that page. So you in particular have really drawn the ire and the unrelenting attention of Representative Fine. What is it there's political operatives all over, there's negative campaigns all over. Why you?
Well, there's a reason why I call my group the Relentless Group. I've been through a lot. I shouldn't even be here. I've been through so much. I didn't think I was coming back from combat after some of the things that I had been through and had to face, going forward. So people talking bad about me or accusations made by Randy Fine, it doesn't really do anything to me. It's not going to intimidate me. I can't be intimidated by his words or, that's kind of his goal. I believe his goal is to suppress my First Amendment right to speak. What he's trying to do is, number one, discredit me, and number two, shut me up. He's the government. That is the entire purpose of the First Amendment, is to protect your freedom of speech from the government interfering with it. That is his entire motive. That is the only reason that he's doing what he wants to do, is to stop me from saying the things that I'm saying about him, because no one else will say them. Why? Because he will retaliate against them. He has an ethics hearing coming up next month for doing the same thing when he threatened the city of West Melbourne and the Special Olympics for their funding, for not inviting him to a fundraiser and inviting school board member Jennifer Jenkins instead. And we have those text messages. It made national news. He told them, you just put your funding for flood mitigation for your citizens at risk because you invited her and you didn't honor me. That's the level of bullying and extortion that he does using his position to do it. And so city councilmen are afraid, not just for their own personal attacks, but for their residents, that are going to suffer because of his personal gripes.
So most recently, Representative Randy Fine filed a complaint in February of this year citing election law violations over electioneering and a defunct PAC that you used. Tallahassee elections attorney Ronald Myers said this is a pretty extreme case, noting it's rare to see so many infractions from a single committee. According to the Florida Today, FEC investigators identified 48 separate violations across 12 cases with 116 combined counts, although the number is really not that high, as some of them were repeated across cases. As of today, the FEC, which is the Florida Election Commission, claims that Representative Fine's complaints, Robert, you've taken plea deals in 6 of 12 charges, 5 formal charges remain, and 1 charge was dismissed. There are additional charges through Indiantown's Scott Watson, where you still face 27 charges, and your PAC, Friends of Florida, faces 33 charges. There are a myriad of charges that we will follow, but because these cases are open, Robert has been advised not to discuss them. I wanted to put them out there so you know they're out there, but you can't talk about these as they're open, and there's certainly a lot more to talk about besides just these FEC violations. It's claimed that you falsified your DD 214 papers. That is your discharge papers for the Army. Were you honorably discharged from the Army?
Yes.
And we're showing that on Facebook now. Robert has shown me his documents. They definitely, it's a real card, real documents. You were also awarded a Bronze Star Medal.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that, because that was something where you ran into a burning building when you were serving. It wasn't while you were in Iraq. I'm not sure the location. While you were serving in Iraq, it turned out nobody was in the building, but you didn't know that, and you were the only one that ran in to try and make sure that the building was clear, and that's why you received that award.
Right. It was a very tough day. It put me in the ICU for several days. I got an inhalation injury from it, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone unless it's your children in that burning building, do not. It's almost suicide. It's nothing like you see on TV where you're looking around and it's completely black. It's unbelievably hot, and it burned my lungs. But thankfully, I was pulled out and brought to the ICU. But that's what led to me being medically retired from the Army. Is I could no longer breathe anymore.
And you are medically retired.
Right.
I don't have a military background, so a couple questions here.
Sure.
Can you be honorably discharged if you took a plea deal in a rape case?
I don't know. That's just a very legal question. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question, and I don't know if you can answer this one either, but can you be honorably discharged if you embezzled money while serving?
I don't think so. You would be in prison. And like when you say if you take a plea deal, I guess it depends on what the plea deal is.
Okay.
Like a plea deal can be, if you confess to this, then you got to go pick up trash for 20 days.
Okay.
Or a plea deal can be, we're going to give you 5 years instead of 20 years.
We're going to go into the plea deal
Right.
that was claimed later in the show
Yeah.
when we hook back up on our second Facebook Live section. Representative Fine claims you are a Brevard REC committeeman, which is one of the leadership roles in the Republican Party. Do you hold this or any other leadership position within the Republican Party?
No, I don't. I'm a member of BREC.
Which is the Brevard Republican Executive Committee, but you don't
Right.
hold a leadership position within that.
Correct.
Okay. The other claim is you're a multi-state convicted felon.
I mean, he says so much, and these are very easy things to prove if they were true. If I was a convicted felon, you could be able to pull up some kind of document or public record that says that. There isn't one because I'm not. No matter how many times he repeats it, and he increases the number every time. If I was a convicted felon, I wouldn't be allowed to have a weapon. I have a gun in my car right now, and I could be taken to jail for it just for saying I have it. And I welcome the Martin County Sheriff's Office to come look. And I promise you, I wouldn't be arrested because I'm not a convicted felon. It's just not true.
And convicted felons cannot have guns.
Correct. Yes.
Just wanted to state that out there again. You may have had charges. There may be allegations, but convictions there are none.
None.
I just want to, one of the Indiantown people, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because this was something we talked a great deal about, and that's those voter rolls. They feel that you did a great job deflecting. Again, voter rolls you did have access to, but that's something different than the absentee voter list, which the Secretary of Election states clearly only 3 people met the requirements to have the list. I'm being one of them. That's Anthony Zweiner. He did not sign the waiver to obtain this. When he backpedaled on this, saying he's 90% sure he received it from the Secretary of Election, but if not, he was still allowed to have it. That is a lie, and he knows he deflected.
I'm not deflecting, and if I'm wrong, I will say this. However I got the rolls, I will provide it.
Okay.
So whether I got it from them, I'm almost 90% certain I got it from the supervisor.
Okay.
Because that's usually where you get it from.
All right.
If I didn't, whoever I got it from, I will send it to you.
Thank you. I'm holding you to that, Robert.
Okay.
Another claim that you're a wife beater. Court records show that you do have a misdemeanor.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. I know this is some of the tough things, folks, but these are the allegations that are out there. There are some truth to them, but there are also some exaggeration. So, Robert, I've looked at this record. I've talked to you about it. Are you a wife beater? And tell us why you do have a misdemeanor on this.
Yes, I absolutely do have a misdemeanor. This happened in South Carolina. The law in South Carolina is if there is a 911 domestic violence call made, somebody has to be arrested. That's the law. My wife and I got into an argument, and I'm sure every married couple understands how those arguments can go. I suffer from PTSD. That's also part of my medical retirement. At the time that this happened was me going through my diagnosis and treatment, initial treatment for my PTSD, and we had just had a baby. We were arguing about diapers, of all things, this day. And it got to the extent where I was trying to leave the house because I was trying to remove myself from the situation, and she wouldn't let me leave the house. And she took my keys. I grabbed her wrist, took my keys back, and she ran and grabbed the phone, called 911, and said, my 6'2", 215-pound PTSD husband just put his hands on me, and she hung up the phone. And you can imagine the police response to that. And I sat there and I waited for them to come, and they asked me what happened. And I said, they said, "Did you put your hands on her?" I said, "Yes." I grabbed her wrist and I took my keys back. And I said, "I'm just trying to leave my house." And they said, "Well, you're leaving your house now." And they arrested me. And we never lived together since then, which is why she has my military records and all these other things that we'll talk about later. And that was it. I paid a $50 fine. I admitted to what I did, and I took the ramifications for that. But it's not a domestic violence conviction. It's a simple assault, third-degree misdemeanor with a $50 fine. Had I been convicted of domestic violence, I wouldn't have been able to stay in the military because you wouldn't be able to have a weapon under the Lautenberg Amendment. So those things are not true. I think it's, anyone can say you're a wife beater if you have, a domestic violence charge, but I think it's important to understand what happened, because it doesn't necessarily mean the way it's being presented. So to say you're a survivor of domestic violence when you know the details are not supportive of that is just disingenuous.
The next claim, you're charged with child abuse for abandoning your son, and it's stated that you are no longer able to have contact with your son. It was stated he was left in a car while you gambled in a casino all day. There is truth to that story as well, but tell us about that.
Yeah, so the truth is it was part of this whole confrontation with my wife, and I was trying to take my son camping up in North Carolina, and I had rented a hotel that night at the casino resort there because I was comped hotels at that resort. So we were getting in so late, I booked that before we could go to the campsite because we wouldn't be able to set up the campsite at night. On my way there, I got called by my commander with my wife accusing me of breaking into her vehicle, stealing thousands and thousands of dollars. So my commander told me I had to come back, which meant I had to cancel my reservation and cancel this time with my son because I only had my son during the summers. I went inside the hotel to cancel the reservation, and I left my son in the car with the iPad, with the car running and the air conditioner on. Randy Fines says that he was in a parking garage and it was the middle of June and he was locked in a hot car. That's not true. It was a holiday weekend. There was a long line of people. Someone saw my son in the car and called the police. I would do the same thing, but looking back on it, it was obviously a mistake to leave him in the car, but it was also a very, very stressful and difficult time for me and frustrating, that I had just drove from Florida to North Carolina and now I had to drive to South Carolina because my wife just called and said that, I stole money from her. Go ahead.
Can you still have contact with your son?
Yes, none of that's true. I was arrested because when the police came, they were like, "Well, what were you doing?" I said, I'm in there gambling. What do you think I'm doing?" And I said, "No, I'm trying to cancel my reservation so we can leave." And I did get an attitude with them, and they arrested me. And then a week later, the charges were dropped because they just went and looked at the video. A casino has lots of cameras. They looked at the video and saw that I was not in there, gambling, all day with my son there.
Well, the charges weren't completely dropped. You do have misdemeanor child abuse.
No, they were completely dropped. The arrest was a misdemeanor arrest. Randy Fines says it was a felony arrest. It says it's a misdemeanor arrest, and the case was dismissed before even having a hearing. So where it says VD on that document, that stands for voluntarily dismissed.
Okay.
So there's no charges at all.
I did not see the VD, and I don't see it on here, but that it's only part of a
it
document.
should be on that Facebook post.
So,
yeah.
okay.
Right.
And I will say, too, that a couple saw him. He was crying in the car.
Mm-hmm.
The police said, we only got a minute. So, folks, we're going to be shutting down here in less than a minute. We're going to pick this conversation up. But the police took an hour to find you, so it was an hour and a half he was out in the car. That's what's in the report.
Right. That's what they said in the report. They were looking for. So when they said he was in the car all day, they're talking to a 6-year-old. He meant we were driving. We drove from Florida to North Carolina all day.
Okay, so folks, I'm sorry, we're out of time for this hour, but we are going to come back and do another Facebook Live. Give us about 10 or 15 minutes to reset up, and we're going to continue this conversation at that point. Thank you very much. We'll answer your questions as well from the Facebook Live feed.